Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second session of tonight's PEO 2023 Council Elections All Candidates meetings. My name is Arthur Sinclair, and I will be the moderator for tonight's discussion. Tonight, we will hear from candidates for Vice President. The two candidates participating in tonight's meeting are Christopher Shaheen and Abhishek Gupta. The electronic meeting with the candidates via webcast enables voters to learn more about the candidates and PEO issues, so more of them will vote. Voters were able to post questions online in advance of this discussion. We'll try to get to as many of those as possible. In accordance with the approved protocol for the all candidates meeting, as moderator, I may shorten the questions and not read out preambles to questions, may select any questions, may remove offensive and duplicate questions, and may ask questions not on the platform. Each candidate will be provided 2 minutes for opening remarks. I will then direct the questions to a candidate. That candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the question. After the candidate has responded, the remaining candidate will have 1 minute to address the first candidate's response to the question. Following the question period, the candidates will have 90 seconds each for closing remarks. The order of speakers was determined by a draw earlier this evening. The views and opinions expressed on this broadcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the PEO and are the responsibility of the candidates. So, without further delay, let's get started with opening remarks. The first candidate for Vice President is Christopher Shaheen.
Thank you, Arthur. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Shaheen, and I'm running for Vice President. I'm the current PEO Senior East Central Region Counselor. I'm the chair of the Regional Counselors Committee and the past chair of the Chapter's Leadership Conference. I have 12 years of professional work experience in the power utility industry, along with an educational background in project management, risk management, business performance leadership, construction, and I also hold a Six Sigma Black Belt professional designation, all things that I've been using throughout my council term. I'm running to advocate for you, the members, to tackle some of the major principles of concern at the council table, such as self-regulation, licensing, modernization of our profession, in a transparent, respectful, and accountable way at the table. I'd like to wish my fellow election running candidates good luck. As for PEO members, this night is for you. So please, I encourage you all to take advantage of the opportunity to ask questions or email me at any time throughout the election period. Get out there and vote. If you want to make your vote count, again, my name is Christopher Shaheen, and I look forward to sharing a little more about myself to you tonight. Thank you.
The second candidate for Vice President is Abhishek Gupta.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year, by the way, to all the audience. My name is Abhishek Gupta, and tonight I'm here to running for the Vice President for 2023 PEO Council. About myself, I'm born and raised in India, completed my engineering over there in metallurgical engineering, and then moved to Canada to complete my PhD in materials engineering. I have over 14 years of work experience working out in West as well as within Ontario, together in the oil and gas industry, where I have developed these skills in the profession, in the engineering, in the operations, and in the leadership as well. With my experience and the past experience in the council, as well as the other experiences, I feel that with my knowledge, experience, and learning, I want to bring that and share that with the professional engineering development through the PEO, and some of the core key things which I like to address and utilize PEO platform to strengthen our interface and collaboration to work through our different groups, industries, academic partners, governance, etc. Also foster a continuous learning culture, a continuous improvement mindset with our technological advancements, which is happening all around us, as well as helping to continuously improve our regulations and our engineering practices within our province to make sure that we stay as lean, as the most efficient and the modern regulators, not just in the province, but also pioneer us as all across Canada as one of the leading regulators. So again, thank you very much for everyone for joining tonight, and look forward to hear all your questions and hopefully answer all your questions as well. So thank you again, and yeah, let's look forward for the evening. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes the opening remarks, and we'll move to the question segment. Now, the first question will go in the same order as the opening remarks, and then after that, we'll go back and forth, back and forth. So the first question goes to Christopher. Based on your knowledge of the Professional Engineers Act and the regulations, how would you describe PEO's core mandate?
Thank you, Arthur. I would say PEO's core mandate is made up of 4 parts. You have the to serve and protect the public interest, license and regulate, advance the practice of engineering, and of course, operate under the Professional Engineers Act. It's my belief that those are the 4 core values of PEO.
Thank you. And Abhishek, based on your knowledge of the Professional Engineering Act and the regulations, how would you describe PEO's core mandate?
So to me, a PEO's core mandate is to protect public interest through the self-regulatory body for engineering profession. Certainly that is achieved through our licensing process for our professional engineers, setting up and maintaining regulatory practices, processes, ethics, building the knowledge set, building knowledge set for all the new engineers around our emerging technologies, our different disciplines, as well as managing our complaints, any complaints against that, to make sure that it is addressed efficiently and appropriately, but at the same time also gaining any feedback from our professional engineer community and continuously improving ourselves in that space. And that's how we fulfill our core mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and back to Abhishek, and what do you see as your role as a counselor and as vice president, that is, as a member of the board of directors, in fulfillment of PEO's core mandate?
So, as we know, in our engineering profession, it is continuously evolving with all the emerging technologies. The industry focus has been continuously changing with not just around us, even globally. Thus, PEO needs to be always up to date in our practices, standards, licensing requirements, through our learning mindset to educate our new engineering talent, to build upon those new engineers to make sure that they stay most relevant, most competent, and most educated, not just in our province, but also outside of province when needed to be. So that's where I think as a board of director, as a vice president, I want to bring that thought process within our council to make sure that we participate collaborate with other partners, as well as work together to this common goal to make sure that we stay most relevant and achieve that goal through in a smart fashion to make sure that we stay as in the best interest of our public safety. Thank you.
And Christopher, what do you see as your role on council as vice president and fulfilling PEO's mandate?
Well, as we heard, PEO's core mandates are quite big. I would say to get involved and to go above and beyond. I would see myself as being an active voting member of council, participating in the governance and board committees where I can make some real impactful changes, be involved in task forces and working groups as needed. As we know, those kind of evolve from those board committees. I'd be a resourceful and contributing member to council and license holders as well, and uphold the councilor's code of conduct, of course. That's where I see myself.
Thank you. So, getting into the PEO questions, I'm going to talk about the strategic plan. I'll go back the first question, and this will go to Christopher first. And a strategic goal in PEO's 2023-2025 strategic plan is to ensure all stakeholders see relevance and value in PEO. Reflecting on this goal, whom would you identify as some of PEO's key stakeholder groups, organizations, and what do you think meaningful and appropriate engagement with these stakeholder groups look like?
So one of the 4 goals of that 2023-2025 strategic goal plan is to ensure that all stakeholders see the relevance and the value in PEO. What the plan also describes is that part of doing that is to refresh PEO's vision. So the key stakeholders would be first and foremost PEO's members, the chapter leaders, the volunteers, but also Engineers Canada, the directors that sit on that board that were past PEO council members, the Attorney General's Office of Ontario, and the public, of course. So these stakeholders should be aware of our vision, our intentions of the profession. Thank you.
Thank you. And to Abhishek.
Yep. So I think in terms of the stakeholder, all our engineering profession engineers, EITs, graduating engineers, they are all our PEO stakeholders who are in the province and for whom PEO works to build the regulations, processes, practices to make sure that their engineering profession is in the best interest of our public safety. Now, if we talk about the specific groups for the PEO, where PEO has stakeholders, I think our provincial or regulatory bodies, other regulatory bodies across the province, our advocacy groups, our federal regulatory bodies, our engineering regulators, our other technical organizations, industrial organizations. So those all are our key stakeholders. In terms of the meaningful or appropriate engagement with any stakeholder, I think the key for the great engagement is to have working on the common goals and objectives and setting up those. Once we have a common goals and understanding on objectives, it is easy to build a collaborative path and work towards that common objective. So that would be the key to have a efficient or effective engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. And going back to Abhishek, how would you describe your leadership style? And you can provide examples.
Yeah, so in terms of my leadership style, I'm an authentic leader with a continuously learner mindset. I always bring in as an open mind and always seek to learn, to know about things. Certainly as a leader, not necessarily you know everything or everything about, and you cannot be expert on everything, but keeping an open mind is the key to learn, to be open and understand what is required and leverage our team or empower our team to deliver those results, to deliver those objectives which we need to do. And that would be the key, as would be, I would see, to set up and making sure that help in improving.
And to Christopher, how would you describe your leadership style? Can you provide examples?
Yep. I would say my leadership style is to be an inclusive leader. I believe in win-win situations. I'm also experienced to know that you can't make everyone happy, and we're human and we don't know everything. So I would say that the best example of leadership for me is to lead by example. And being a current counselor, it's my hope that I've been living up to that. Thanks.
All right, you're making my job harder with shorter answers. So, so I'm going to get into a couple of so let's talk a little bit more PO issues. PO is a number of legally permitted functions and activities that fall outside its regulatory mandate and are not necessarily essential to effective board governance. How should council deal with the functions and activities that are neither regulatory nor related to governance? And that goes back to Chris.
So in 2022, I was actually a key player in the chapter's risk assessment on those non-filter activities and the whole consultation process. So as part of a working group, we have prepared a report that will go to the GNC committee of our findings and recommendations. So I truly believe in respect for the chapters and helping where possible. I think council should support the recommendations made in the report after it's been reviewed and accepted by the GNC committee. I believe that there's a lot of opportunity to make things better for license holders and chapter members. Anything that's high risk should be discussed and mitigated accordingly. And throughout this process, I've stood up for the chapters. I made amendments to the motions to include them on this kind of consultation and this kind of assessment of the non-filter activities. And I'll continue to do so if elected. Thank you.
And Abhishek, your response.
Sure. So certainly this is my first time to get involved in the PEO, so I probably not know clearly what actual function activities which exist already in PEO, but based on my limited understanding, if I understand correctly, these are the functional committees which may not necessarily required for the governance, but could be some of them required to operationalize those governance. And for that purpose, I think council has to look at those functions or activities as fit for purpose and ready to optimize or make it modification as needed instead of setting up as a status quo. So I think just keeping that as an open for the fit for purpose approach, that would be my strive for that. So, thank you.
Thank you. And going back to Abhishek, and yes, definitely inspired by your last answer. And how would you describe the optimal relationship between operations and government's role in a modern regulatory body? And where would you draw the line between the two?
So I think the relation between the operations and governance, they both are the key important functions. So the governance is typically the one who's setting up the strategic directions, a long-term goal, a policy, and then the objectives as a regulator. While the operation is the one who is basically taking those objectives, policies, and making them realized with the setting up the midterm or short-term goals. So that's where I see the how the two functions together, and the key and there has to be a feedback loop, a key strong interface set up between the two to make sure that we continuously improve and work together each other. So that's where I would draw a line between the two, where one is setting up the long-term strategy objectives, while the other part is delivering those objectives and operationalizing them. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christopher, your response.
So operational tasks are conducted by staff, PEO staff, and led by the CEO and registrar of the PEO. The governance roles are conducted by council members. So we have lots of change ahead of us. We have a new CEO registrar coming in, and we have a good chunk of new council members that will be elected in. So to have an optimum relationship between two different streams made up of new and existing people, role succession will be important. Role learning will be important, but also the fundamentals of a new relationship: trust, transparency, and cohesiveness, along with respect, I think would be some really core things to get those things moving. So if I was elected as vice president, I would ensure that there's a strong and open communication between CEO Registrar Jennifer Coglietta and council, communicating the plans, the ideas which council has in advance. I think would be important to draw the line. One is here, one is there, and we got to work together.
Thank you. And going back to Christopher, building on something you did say, and I'm going a little bit to the audience question specifically, sort of summarizing as best I can. Knowing that there will be a new registrar in 2023, registrar and CEO of the PEO, what challenges do you think that registrar / CEO will face, and how will you as vice president help them meet those challenges?
So I think one of the biggest challenges would be to kind of hit the ground running or flying, to meet the deadlines, to build the relationships and the trust needed to get the goals accomplished. We have a deadline with FARPACTA, which is June 2023. Which is something to reshape our entire licensing system. So I think that would be one of the biggest challenges. I do believe Jennifer is a very strong leader, very personable, very knowledgeable in many ways, and has actually come to one of our council meetings and has been open about a lot of things. I would say that trust will be one of the biggest things. Transparency will be another, and I would look very forward to working with her and the rest of council. As vice president, I would be there to ask the tough questions, to support council and staff when needed to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Abhishek, your response.
So I think I would pretty much agree what Christopher just mentioned in terms of the hit the ground running, because that is the key. As anytime a new person comes in, like including myself, if I get elected into this role as a new person, certainly the key is that we learn quick, we learn fast, and then hit the ground running right away to make sure that things are still moving, because the things does not stop just because a new person comes, right? The deliverable still has to be done, just such as for PACTA or any other new regulations or the mandatory CPD or peak program, all sorts of things. I'm sure there are a lot more to happen. So certainly that is the key. And I think that the working together with the new CEO would be the key to work together and have a good collaborative approach, as well as setting up our priorities together to make sure that we are all aligned and moving forward in the same direction versus going other way. So that would be the initial connection, to build initial connection, to build that initial collaborative approach with each other, with the new CEO, and think that's where would be the starting point for me, at least. Thank you.
Thank you. And now that I've heard the acronym for PACTA twice, that's my time to spell out what it is in the question that relates to it. And this will go first to Abhishek. From a public protection standpoint, what, if any, value do you see in PEO's efforts to streamline the licensure of engineering graduates, Canadian or internationally trained? And what, if any, opportunities are created by recent government changes, example, amendments to the Fair Access to Regulated Professions and Compulsory Trades Act? That is the Fair Access to Regulated Professions and Compulsory Trades Act, or FERPACT.
Thank you. So certainly I came to know about FERPACT very recently, I would be honest. So the way I understood and read about it, basically the FERPACT is to help ensure the regulated professions and individuals applying for the registration by regulated professions are governed by the registration practices that are transparent, objective, impartial, and fair. Now, definitely, I do see a value in streamlining those licensing process for the engineering graduates and minimizing any confusion and qualification. And especially, I hear about that there's a lot more changes coming around internationally trained professionals, and certainly it is a positive opportunity, especially in the world we are working where our engineering profession is moving towards more and more virtual style. And I think we have to understand and we have to recognize the local as well as the international talent to work within the province. So I do agree the changes. I do support the changes and bringing those streamline in the licensure process certainly is the way forward.
Thank you. And Christopher, your response with respect to FERPACTA.
I would very much agree with Abhishek as well. I believe there's a lot of value in streamlining the licensure of engineering graduates, but when it comes to public protection, we really need to dig deep on this government change. For example, equivalent doesn't mean equal, right? A degree could be equal in value, but it doesn't mean you receive the same education as you did here or there. You may have lots of experience, but do you have the levels of ethics to be upholded in Ontario as professional engineers? It's very easy to come in and learn the codes of this city or that province. So I'm not worried about that. It's more about the ethical piece for me that puts the attachment to the professional side of it. There are some of the points and discussions that we've been having at the RPLC committee, which I've been active on since FERPACTA hit Council's agenda. And I'm confident that the work at Council right now will have a positive impact on the value of the professional engineer here and abroad. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm going to stay on this and go straight to, I am going to go roughly verbatim with one of the online questions in the same sort of field. And this goes first to Christopher. So do you believe the licensing changes mandated by the Fairness Commissioner are a risk to PEO's self-regulation status? And how do you think the risk can be mitigated?
So it's definitely a risk to self-regulation, because self-regulation by definition means we regulate ourselves. But when someone else comes over and taps us on the shoulder and says, hey, you got to make these changes, 100%, I believe that it is a risk to our self-regulation beliefs and principles. However, we shouldn't be completely ignorant and blind and just be living in our own little world. That's not how things work. So I do believe that it's important to listen. It's important to take these things into consideration and to definitely make the decision in-house. So when someone comes and taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, you got to make this opportunity by this time, I would say, okay, what are some other opportunities we can make at the same time? What other explorations of opportunities can we take while we're doing this change about licensing? And that's what we've been trying to do at Council and with this committee that we've been working with. So that's my standpoint on that. Thank you.
Thank you. To Abhishek?
So yeah, I kind of agree too, as well as a self-regulating body. Definitely, it is important to act upon based on our self-regulations, but at the same time, do respect to what is coming up. And as Christopher mentioned, tapping on our shoulder and hey, you have to meet that requirement. But certainly, before we meet the requirement, we have to understand what it is, how we can implement it, and how does that still make most relevance for our engineering profession. So having that clear understanding no issues for sure. We can, but that understanding has to be there for sure to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you. And this first question, we'll go back to Abhishek, and it's me doing my best to summarize a number of the questions sort of thematically. And there's a number of questions online about mandatory continuing professional development, or PEO's peak. So I'm just going to open-end the question and just ask you, what is your position on mandatory continuing professional development?
So let me put it this way, that the country's professional development is like a professional development by your own. So we all do practice our engineering. We all do a lot of good work, a lot of the lot of the things we learn. But how do we really recognize? How do we document it? And then making that as a mandatory CPD, I think this is the good way to document it, to showcase your trainings, to showcase your learning, as well as making sure identifying the gaps where are to bring you most competitive and up to speed. So I think, to me, the mandatory CPD is the one of the most great program for keeping our professional engineers most competitive and most learned. Thank you.
Thank you. And so Christopher, what is your position on mandatory continuing professional development?
So I'm not against CPD as a concept. I think what a lot of members are really frustrated with is how the process came to be. I don't think many were actually against CPD itself, but rather, again, how it got approved or the lack of evidence linking it to public safety. You can't say you're making evidence-based decisions without the evidence or the facts. And you can't have trust if you said, we're going to do this, and then you turn around and do something else. So I think that's really the core issue with the whole CPD discussion around our profession right now. I have tons of continuing professional education, and I know a lot of people do as well. And like Abhishek said, it's all just a matter of documenting it now. It's not a big deal. The PEAK program is actually very rigorous and made very simple to adapt to our existing lifestyles. It's just, let's document it and let's take into consideration the risk to public safety. I think that's my answer.
Yeah. Thank you. So just a bit of a time check. We're probably in about the 10-minute mark. So a minute a question, 3 or 4, just to give you a heads up. I think with that in mind, I think I'll just, ask you some questions that, you should be well acquainted with, which is you. So can you describe any involvement you've had as a volunteer with PEO? And with that, what do you think is the appropriate role for volunteers at the PEO or regulatory body? Oh, and let's go back to Christopher. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. No problem. So I just want to make sure it's clear.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. So it's on my volunteering on PEO. Can you please repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. And let's start the clock again. So describe that's on me. Describe any involvement you've had as a volunteer with PEO. And what do you think then, with that question, what do you think is the appropriate role for volunteers at a regulatory body?
Sure. So as mentioned, I've been the regional counselor for the East Central region for the past year and a half. I've been heavily involved in 6 chapters. The East Central region is the most populated engineers in Ontario. And so there's a lot of activity going on. I've been to every single license ceremony for the last 6 chapters in every region. Sorry, in every chapter of the region. And I've also been the chair of the Regional Counselors Committee. I've been part of working groups. I've been the chair and vice chair of the Chapters Leadership Conference, which is an annual conference that has all the chapter leaders from all Ontario come in, all 36 chapters come in, and we have a good time about leadership. So I've been heavily involved in it, and I think that for anyone that wants to volunteer, I highly encourage them, but make sure you have 1, the time commitment, and 2, the support system. It's definitely a time commitment, and I would encourage you to do it. It's very rewarding. Thank you.
Thank you. Abhishek, what involvement have you had with the PEO?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, certainly I have not been involved with the PEO specifically for any volunteer activity in the past so far. Certainly, I have tried it once or twice, but it did not work out with the timing and other commitments. To me, volunteering within the council, certainly it's always valuable. It always good, and it all based on your personal interest, where you want to contribute to within the PEO as a volunteer. So certainly not to restrict yourself in there. What not to do, I think, in the key thing is that not to restrict yourself with a single point. So keeping open mind, keeping a learner mindset, come with a learning mindset there, and make sure that any opinions are not necessarily being obliged as a PEO opinion, because you are working as, so all the personal opinions are personal, but the PEO, the official communication obviously comes from the PEO. So that is just keeping that in mind. So thank you.
Thank you. And going back to Abhishek, how would you define success during your term on council?
So if I have to define my success as a leader in this council, as a vice president, I think empowering the council, putting the council in a shape where we could make the most relevant decisions in a fit for purpose way and most optimal way. And those are also most relevant to our professional engineers, along with all the engineers which are coming through all the emerging disciplines as well. And not just in the province, but also making them most relevant all across Canada. So that would be my success. Thank you.
Thank you. And to Christopher, how would you define success during a term of council?
I would say moving forward with the plans set out by committees and council, providing input on motions to be good and not just good for now or good to get by. I like good for a long time, and that would fit all the scenarios we're looking for. With 25 members on council, we get caught up in one or two words that change the meaning or perception. I like good language without ambiguity, and I think that's a piece of success that we always meet, especially when you have consensus around a motion. When we have a motion and almost everybody votes yes, that to me is success. I like to have alignment with strategic plans. I like to increase transparency. I think those things are characteristics of success at council. I also think helping the chapters, the volunteers and the chapter leaders, being there for them, they're right back there for you as well. That is success when it's reciprocated. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, just looking at the clock, and I think we have one more. I'm going to do one more issues question, then we'll probably have the last question after that. And this is, we'll go back to Christopher. Similar to the reverse of the previous question, which what do you think of the PEO strengths, and how would you leverage those strengths?
Well, I think PEO has a lot of strengths. We have the licensing process. We have come a long way with this, and now it's digital. And with the upcoming changes with PARPACTA, it will make things even better for a lot of future applicants. Also, one of PEO strengths is that we have some of the most amazing and passionate volunteers and leaders in the engineering community and chapters, truly selfless individuals that want to make the world a better place. I really believe that we have a great staff, and we have people who are very passionate about being on council. I think PEO strength is having volunteers do the work because there's no passion, no fire, no desire like that of a volunteer. So I would definitely say those are some of our biggest strengths. And I applaud those who volunteer. Thank you.
And the response to Abhishek, what do you think are PEO strengths, and how would you leverage them?
Sure. So I think so again, with my relatively limited involvement so far, not being in the council before, in the PEO, what I see as a general engineering professional engineer working, having the licensing through the PEO. I think the PEO policies are set in good shape, as well as the licensing process is in good shape. And also what I read or hear about the good working relation with our provincial government, and certainly the way PEO addresses our complaints or the public complaints in the public protection. So I feel those are probably at present the key strengths within the PEO. Thank you.
Thank you. And now going back to Abhishek, this will be the last question for both of you. And what is the one thing you want voters to know about you?
So the one thing I want to know voters about me is my continuous improvement and continuous learner mindset to bring to the council and have that working with the council members in collaboration, working a collaborative approach and setting up the council for the long-term success. So that is the one thing I want to bring to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christopher, what would be the one thing you would want voters to know about you?
In light that there's unfinished work at council and there's a lot of challenges ahead, I would want people to know that I'm a strong believer in evidence-based decision-making, self-regulation, and understanding the risks and the financial impacts to motions brought to council, along with respect for members. I'm a motivated leader who will stand up for you, the members, the profession, and if you want to make your vote count, vote for Christopher Shaheen.
Thank you very much. Now, that concludes the question portion of the evening. Now, each candidate will have a 90-second period for closing remarks. The first closing remarks goes to Christopher Shaheen. Your closing remarks then.
Thank you, Arthur. If elected as vice president, I'd like those to also know that I'm a passionate person about advocating and respecting members and license holders and making good decisions. There are many challenges up ahead, like we've discussed tonight, for PACTA, CPD, empowerment of chapters and volunteers. But throughout my years on council, I've been able to work closely with members in council committees and want to work on empowering chapters to improve the overall value for new volunteers, for the executive boards of those chapters, and starting with a mission statement for chapters and being part of the PEO risk assessment consultation, I've carefully heard a lot of the issues that are coming from chapters. And I'm here to make that better, and I would like to oversee that. I'd be able to bring concerns to the council table and address them head on, transparently, respectfully, and with accountability. If you feel that PEO can be doing more for you, you can count on me to deliver. Vote for Christopher Shaheen for Vice President. Thank you very much.
Abhishek Gupta, your closing remarks.
Sure. Thank you, Arthur, for tonight being a wonderful moderator. Now, certainly, if I'm elected and certainly being a big part of the PEO Council, I'm motivated and really strong believer to bring a fresh perspective and vision to the Council by driving our PEO mandate to our highest level of integrity, diversity, accountability, professionalism, and the leadership in collaboration and working with our council members, our committees, our external stakeholders, internal stakeholders, and PEO executives all across to make sure that we are again moving towards a common goal in terms of improving our regulation, our policies, as well as in the best interest of our public. So that is my voice, and certainly thanks to everyone for listening to us tonight, and appreciate your voting to me as your candidate for the vice president for 2023 council. The more or less not just for us, but vote for the PEO, because the more voices we hear from all our professional engineering committees, the better we could get. So definitely, please get involved. Please share the message with your other professional engineer colleagues, friends, families to get involved, and that's how we can have more voices in there. So thank you for tonight.
Well, that concludes tonight's discussion. I would like to thank the candidates for their participation and also those watching online for your interest. Thank you for your interest in the governance of the engineering profession. I hope you found the meeting to be informative and worthwhile. As a reminder, a recording of the meeting will be available on PEO's website for the duration of the election. Thank you, and again, to everyone for participating in our discussion. And remember, your vote matters, so does your profession. Supposed to say that on the other end. Now you can laugh. Voting is quick and easy. You can vote on the internet or by phone. Voting opens on January 13th and voting closes at 4 p.m. on February 17th. All the information you need is on PEO's website at peo.on.ca. Good night.